Well, it's summertime, and it's time for the next monthly installment of Senior Living in Alexandria. I'm Jim Roberts, host of this show, and our audience, we hope, is not just seniors, but caregivers, providers, family, friends, and our goal is to provide some very, very useful information. We've got a good program today, and I'm looking forward to it. I want to introduce our guest. Jane King is here. She's from the Alexandria Commission on Aging. In that, she's done many, many, many different things. This is actually, in fact, her third appearance on this show. We have not exhausted her yet. She'll be back. and so she's here, and then I also want to introduce a new guest, brand new to me and brand new to this show. This is Debbie Spiliotopoulos, and she is here from the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. She has a variety of responsibilities, but our focus today is on a couple of things that we want to bring to you. We want to talk about livable communities, and before we get into that topic, and then how it relates to seniors, but before we get into that topic, Jane and Debbie, could you just describe a little bit better than I did what your jobs are, what your responsibilities are, please?
My responsibility is to the Commission on Aging. I am the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. So in that role, I have to lead the effort to develop a plan we have been accepted into the network of age-friendly communities, which is sponsored by AARP in affiliation with the World Health Organization. Our mayor and city council approved our entry into the network, but because of that, we have a responsibility over a 2-year period to develop a plan that AARP will have to approve that will run for 3 years. We already have a strategic plan, but that ends in 2017, so our planning now is directed to 2018 through 2020. And my job is to essentially make sure that the Commission on Aging is doing all the work to be ready for a plan. It means we have formed committees to develop goals, objectives, measures, and so forth. What's important about doing this is that the fact that the council allowed us to develop a plan that ran from 2013 to 2017 energized the Commission on Aging to the point that we have real authority in the city with the council, with the mayor, and so forth to make recommendations that they consider sound because they know we have spent a lot of time studying them, that we have worked to understand the needs of our residents, to talk to them. We'll be having lots of listening sessions, in fact, with Senior Services in June. So that's essentially my job.
Save that, and we'll come back to it in a second. But Debbie, give us a little bit of background on you, please.
I'm Debbie Spiliotopoulos, and I'm a senior environmental planner at Northern Virginia Regional Commission. And I work on a project called Sharing the Road in Virginia, or Share VA Roads. And that's a multi-disciplinary kind of program where we're really focusing in on reducing crashes for bicycles and pedestrians. And we have an amazing network of local staff and advocates and statewide participants as well. And we just joined up with AARP because in the last 2 years, there's been a huge uptick in pedestrian deaths in people who are 51 and older.
Oh, okay.
And there was a 50% increase from 2015 to 2016. So they're up to 121 deaths in 2016. It's down a little bit for this year. But as a result, we've been working very closely both with ANOVA Trauma Services and also with AARP, and we've had a couple of events that have been really wonderful. So,
well, Jane, bring it back to you. In your work on the strategic plan, you've also mentioned that the scope of the problem in terms of aging, mobility, et cetera. What did you find from your work?
In terms of mobility?
Right.
As Debbie said, that we know the incidence of either injuries or death is higher in the population, 50 and older, and we have seen too many cases in the city recently. So what we plan to do is certainly work with Debbie, with AARP, with ANOVA. We also are planning to, as part of our planning purposes, We will be working with AARP and I think with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission to do audits of the more dangerous intersections in Alexandria identified by statistics, in which case we would look at timing of traffic lights, whether people can cross the street with enough time so that they're not in the middle of the pathway or intersection when the lights change, making sure that there are the pushes to stop traffic, and audible, so that people who who are blind can figure out what's going on with the intersection. So that is part of our planning.
If I understand this right, these are programs that AARP as a national organization has kind of provided a list of topics, a list of concerns, areas of inquiry, and you're following through on some of those, one dimension of which is safety, particularly as it relates to seniors.
And one thing is, Alexandria is the first jurisdiction in Virginia to make a proclamation for Vision Zero, which is the goal
For what?
Vision Zero,
Vision Zero.
which is the goal of no traffic deaths.
Really?
And it's a real leadership in the state, and Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, which funds what we're doing, is actually having a conference on it as well. But Alexandria has really kind of taken the lead on that.
What are some of the kinds of things you'd find in Vision Zero? What sorts of measures or programs would you
A lot
find
of it
in
is prioritizing the safety of the road, and usually when you're looking at trying to reduce crashes, you're looking at enforcement and engineering, which is like what we're going to do with these walkability audits, where you're seeing what are the problems with the road that just makes it more risky. And then the third is education. So I think that with what Alexandria is doing, they're really trying to reach on all those different touchstones.
I'm interested in your audit. So that means that you will look at a particular roadway, and there's some criteria applied to that in terms of maybe visibility or access or bike lanes or whatever.
Right.
Maybe the use of the road.
Even who uses the roads. In other words, is it a pathway
level
for
of-
school children?
Okay.
Is it near a nursing home? Is it near an assisted living facility?
Is there a
So-
transit stop, but it's
yeah.
hard for people to get to it? That's
How do
a-
you compile that into meaningful information? That's a lot of information. How do you boil it down to the lay person so they can understand it, make use of it?
You go ahead.
AARP actually has created a guide.
Oh, okay.
So it asks those of us who are doing an audit to check off 10 questions about an intersection. Those are compiled, and so what the problems are would be clearly identified. And of course, in the case of Alexandria, when we're doing it, we'll be working with the city. And in fact, the city would help us identify the intersections that we should be checking.
So you've got this massive rating of streets. What do you do next? What do you, I mean, how do people like me say, that's a good place to ride my bike and that's not? How do I do that?
We could publicize it for one thing,
Okay.
but the other thing is we would report back to the city. And I think one thing I should mention, as a matter of fact, that in Alexandria, any resident who identifies a high-risk spot or a problem can use what is called Call, Click, Connect.
Okay.
And get online, report the problem. If you feel like the city council should be engaged in this problem, you can contact them through Call, Click, Connect. It works very well. Someone has to respond to you within 24 hours to at least acknowledge that they've received the problem. But I have heard city officials several times recommend use that system because it's a system that works, that will get the complaint to the right people.
How will citizens at large know about this effort? I mean, you've compiled a lot of information, done a lot of analysis, et cetera. How can you package that in a form that they become aware of it?
There would be 2 or 3 ways through local media, possibly through inviting a TV channel to come along with the audit, because you could have an audit that involved a lot of people, but also through AARP's many channels.
Okay.
AARP has it can reach through email, through a newsletter that is sent to Northern Virginia. It could be in the bulletin, it could be in the magazine. So
I
there's,
think all of us, when we get to the age 50, whether we like it or not, AARP finds a way to find us. We're going to have to go to a break now, so save that, and we'll come back to it in just a few minutes, but we've got to go in another direction. We'll be back, so hang on.
How long have we been married there?
For 76 years.
He was kind and generous to me before we married, and he was kind and generous to me all these years that we have been married. We had been looking at a lot of different houses in different places around that area, and when we came by this house, it was green, and I love green. I'm Irish. And so I said, oh, there's our house. I know it. We decided on Meals on Wheels because at my age, I was getting to the point where I couldn't do all the things that I had been able to do. We're the Spans. America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
And we're back. We're here with Jane King on the Alexandria Commission on Aging, and our other guest is Debbie Spiliotopoulos, and she's with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. And we're talking today about livable communities with a particular emphasis on pedestrian safety. We talked a little bit about that before the break, but we did miss some of the stuff. Tell us more, Jane, if you would, about the components of a livable community. I know you're doing a strategic plan, but that's the framework you're hanging things on.
right. And from ARP's perspective in the World Health Organization, it describes them as 8 domains. It's interesting. I think when people think about a community that's livable for older residents, they may think healthcare or supportive services such as long-term care, nursing homes, and so forth. When in fact, all aspects of the community must be looked at to assure that older people can stay in their homes for as long as possible. And I can give you examples.
Okay?
Our outdoor spaces and buildings must be accessible. In other
Okay.
words, in case someone is using a walker or a wheelchair, can they use those buildings? If they're frail, can they get inside the buildings and so forth? So that's one issue. Transportation is a hugely important issue because women tend very often end up not driving for 10 years of their lives. Men, 6 years. So what kind of transportation is available to them? That's an issue. The Commission on Aging.
As a senior.
As a senior.
Okay.
The Commission on Aging is certainly looking at these issues. We have wonderful things like great public transportation, but we have to make sure our sidewalks and roads are safe, that people understand how to use the public transportation system and so forth. Huge issue in Alexandria is housing. 12,000 affordable units were lost since 2000 because rentals kept going up and housing costs have gone up also. So what we hope to do is over time make sure that there's an increase in affordable, accessible housing. In other words, that people can use it if they have any infirmities, vision problems, mobility problems, whatsoever. Social participation is hugely important. So what we're looking at there is to make sure that there are events, intergenerational events or events for older people that are no cost, and there are many available in the city, but we have to make sure that information is getting to those who could best
To avoid
use
isolation.
it. To avoid
among
isolation.
seniors. Okay.
And there are many people in older people living alone, and that's when
Right,
isolation
right.
can occur. We're also very concerned about respect and social inclusion. As you know, this is a very diverse community, and we want to make sure no matter what language is spoken in the home, etc., that we're reaching out with information to those folks about what's available in the city. One of the programs that we hope to establish in senior services is very instrumental in helping us with this, is to have a community ambassador in communities around the city, whether they're neighborhoods, whether they're church communities, whatever. And the community ambassador is trained and knows the resources available in the community, and also, on the other hand, can report back to, for example, the Division of Aging if someone needs something. This is kind of the heart of what we want to do.
In the old days, that would be a precinct captain?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. A very similar kind of role.
Okay.
Civic participation in employment, that is, and we have found it's very important in Alexandria. There are people who are older who want employment. It can be very important to have the services to help people find jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We think the city could do more about that, and we will be working for that also. Communication and information, one of the problems we know that exists, this is true everywhere, is people tend not to worry about what's available to them until there's a crisis, and we want to push out information so that people are well informed before
Sure.
the crisis hits. And there's a whole lot to learn. In other words, you need to know what you may need in your house, or what changes you may need to make in your house if you want to stay there for the rest of your life. So there's great importance in educational efforts, and including, of course, about finance. And then last but not least, community support and health. Alexandria is in generally good shape about that, but we're also concerned about the disparities among minorities in terms of health care. There are good clinics and so forth, but there's more that's actually needed, especially because Medicare expansion did not pass in Virginia, and there's some
Right.
very vulnerable people in Northern Virginia for that reason.
So that's the framework. Those are the goals, I guess, or the objectives
That's right.
of a livable community. And then the slice that we were focusing on earlier was in terms of pedestrian safety, transportation, so forth. Debbie, I think you have some programs that you wanted to be sure people knew about.
Right, I just wanted to share that we have this program called Share VA Roads, and we're also working very closely with Inova, who has a whole program on fall prevention and some other things to support the aging in the region. And what we're trying to do is we have a pocket guide that we distributed throughout the state, and we are working with a whole variety of people to do outreach. And one of the things we're doing is showing expanded crash maps just for the neighborhoods where we are. Crash maps.
Crash maps.
Yeah, and we have a website.
Frequency of crashes at...
It's actually pedestrian and bicycling
incidents.
deaths and crashes and injuries and the cause of what happened. So you can see in your neighborhood where are people getting hurt right now. And we have that also online at sharevaroads.org. So it's a program that's been going on since 2007, but since 2013 we've been really trying to push the outreach. And again, with the crashes that have happened in the older community from 51 up, we really want to make sure that we can reach and support people And I guess the most important thing is when you're a driver, look for bicyclists and pedestrians. When you're walking or riding your bike, just make sure you look left, right, left, and you're wearing bright colored clothing, and that you're crossing at intersections if possible. And to, even though we really want to get people out into transit, a lot of times our transit areas are places where there are crashes. So you just have to be extra cautious.
You mentioned your guidebook. Is what you just said in the guidebook, or is
It
there
is.
other things we can learn from that?
It is. It's the booklet is in Spanish and English, and it's available in lots of places. If you go to probably any AARP event or any local government outreach, you might find these little blue booklets. And it's broken up by pedestrian, if you're a driver, a walker, or a bicyclist. So there's 3 sections, and it's both best practices and the law, which is actually different in DC and Maryland than it is in Virginia. So just a way to stay safe. And then the website has the same information.
How does the Northern Virginia Regional Commission work with its constituent cities? I understand there's a number of cities that make up the commission, but also with organizations like AARP. What's that working relationship like?
So we have, the commission is, the actual commission is elected officials from the 14 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. And we have a number of different programs, and we actually have a whole aging network that we work with on the social services side.
What is that, please?
The social
what's the
services
aging
side.
network?
The aging network is, I think, a whole group of all the people that are working on the aging
The community
issues
of interest.
and social services. And so mostly we will, although we are run by the elected officials, most of the people we work with are local staff on different issues.
Okay.
We do demographics, we do emergence, we do a lot of work with environment, anything that crosses boundaries. And as a result, we've been working on the bicycle and pedestrian safety,
right.
and we do
Survey
trails.
that was mentioned.
Right,
Okay,
right.
good. Well, that's a pretty good overview. There's all these topics will be discussed in more detail at the last speaker series of Senior Services, as you two know, but for the audience, that'll be June 21st. It'll be on the components of a livable community, one of which will be, of course, safety and pedestrian safety, but that'll be June 21st at Beatley Library, and there'll be information on the screen on that. Well, it sounds like you're both engaged in useful enterprises on behalf of seniors. Are there any other components of programs that, how do you decide what your agenda is in this?
Actually, that's a great question, because I want to make sure that the audience knows that we'll be sponsoring listening sessions throughout Alexandria in various neighborhoods, and actually what we're doing for Senior Services on June 21st is going to be a listening session. So we get feedback from the community about what their needs are. Otherwise, we don't want to be in a situation in which we're imposing our thinking. We want to hear back from the community.
Okay.
And we do a lot of our outreach at high crash areas. So anywhere where there's been a lot of pedestrian deaths or crashes. So we have been very interested in both Alexandria, the Route 1 corridor of Fairfax. There's a number of areas.
How do you get a message to seniors? This is important that they become aware of it. You tell your grandkids, look both ways when you cross the street. How do you tell somebody 70, 80 years old the same thing?
It's really interesting because we started out doing a lot of work with kids and their parents, because that was what we thought the original group was. And we got people to sign pledges and stuff. But I tell you, the map is the way to go, because most seniors know a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
They know so much more than I do about those intersections and those areas. So I think it really helps them realize that this is what's happening at this intersection. And I think the very best thing that people can do is, if they know a really bad area, talk to your elected official.
Right.
Get involved, make the click,
Stay aware.
because it's amazing how powerful citizens are. They really have the ear of the electeds. And
We're out of time, but that's a really good way to end this.
oh, good.
They have power. I appreciate it. No, we are out of time. Appreciate it very much. I'd urge everyone to attend the June 21st session and hear more about it and express their opinions and help guide us in things that we need to be doing and amplify what you're doing in this strategic plan. So thank you very much for coming in today and sharing your information, and we'll do what we can to help seniors and everybody else in our community. So
Great.
thank you very much.
Thank you.